And we are live.
Yes.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the latest episode of TechForge. I am your host, Ned, aka Dynamo Ned, and I am glad to have both Jason and Hunter with me this evening.
And
How's
my
it going,
cat,
everybody?
And
Good.
my cat Jade.
Oh, hello, Jade.
What's your cat's name?
Jade, like Jade Dragon.
Ah, nice.
So I was at a friend's house when they just moved in, and we were painting the rooms. And they painted one of the rooms Jade Dragon, which is like teal. I was like, Jade's a nice name for a cat. I'm getting a cat soon. I'll take that.
Nice.
Yep.
Alrighty, so had any fun with any hardware of late, or?
Not really. Not for me. I'm still planning the sleeper build. I'm just waiting on cheaper parts and more deals. Because
Yeah, don't blame you there.
if I wait long enough, I can get the parts that I want for a cheaper price. Like, I think, I'm not really sure. I know that I want to go Ryzen for the Dell build, but I'm not sure if I want to do an Nvidia card or Vega 56 or maybe some kind of um, RX 580. So I'm still waiting on to see if there's a price drop in. If if AMD brings out a competitive card set for the 20 series, then Vega 56 should go down.
Probably won't see that until March, man.
Yeah, there's well, this is going to get into one of our stories, but right now they're currently sampling 7 nanometer. But yeah, there's nothing on AMD's roadmap till March of next year.
That's kind of sad because it seems like 20 series is gonna, well, might take up a couple people's wallets.
Yeah.
That depends.
Well, we're going to talk about why you shouldn't pre-order the 20 series, but inevitably people will. So
Yeah.
That's a good message to get out there.
Yes,
Very
don't
good.
never pre-order because you'll be disappointed. You may be disappointed.
Yeah.
But something that will not disappoint. Well, they disappoint a lot, but it's Valve. And Valve, this is not directly hardware related, but it is something tangential to us being a gaming channel and all. And that's the fact that Valve has released their new Steam beta client for Linux, which includes their Proton Steam Play service. Now, for those not familiar, Proton is basically a fork of the Wine Wine is not an emulator compatibility layer for Linux that lets you run Windows programs on Linux. But it's a fork. Proton being a fork means that it is specifically optimized by Valve for Steam games.
This could be huge. Go ahead, sorry.
So the fact that Steam games that are normally Windows exclusive will be able to run under Steam on Linux, which you can do this right now if you download the beta version of the Steam client on Linux, then this could be something huge. It could finally free budget gamers from having to spend, however much upfront for a Windows license.
So does that mean that I don't really think I see PC gamers buying an iMac or a MacBook and installing Proton on it, because a MacBook or an iMac or an iMac Pro is as much as a high-end, like super high-end computer, custom computer, 2 or 3,000. Actually, the iMac Pro is 5,000. So That does remind me, though. I played on the Windows side, at least on an iMac. I played Left 4 Dead 2, no, Left 4 Dead 1 in in the computer lab that I managed at my college a couple years ago, and it was fun and it worked.
Did you play it in Linux?
No, they didn't have compatibility for games in Linux at that time, but
Okay.
so I played it. I booted into the Well, they all booted into Windows because people were using Macs for certain programs and like graphics.
Right, and that was around the time that Apple implemented Boot Camp, right?
Yes, boot camp, because it was I graduated in 2010, so it was like 2008 or 9 is when I played it. I managed partially managed the the general computer lab. Um, so yeah, that was fun. I also didn't realize I had my headset on, and I didn't realize how loud I was on a day that not many people were there, but some students were there.
Nice.
And my coworker who was working at the time said, "Dude, you're being loud," because I was saying in a university computer lab, yelling at a teammate, "There's a pipe bomb at your feet. There's a pipe bomb at your feet." That's like not the thing
Oh
you
boy.
not the thing you say at a college.
Right.
It's like the
So,
old joke about playing CS:GO at an airport. Bomb has been planted.
Yeah.
serious? Oh, come on. So, getting back to the article, though, this is interesting timing because there's been all this press recently-ish about Windows as a service and having to pay a subscription for that. This could be an interesting solution or an answer to that. So, there is some potential here.
Well, there
I
was
don't know,
also
man.
well, there was also another article people talking about that Microsoft as a service paid subscription is not a thing.
It's not a thing for
Yeah.
Windows.
Yeah, for Windows. Like they're not Microsoft said they're not going to that system where it's paid subscription.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
At least on the consumer end. For enterprise customers, that's a little different. But
Right.
Mm.
Still, this is intriguing. I would definitely be interested in testing this out. Personally.
yeah, and the thing about Proton, the thing that has me excited about it is basically what they're trying to do. They're using already existing tools, and Proton is completely open source. If you want to, you can go to their GitHub, you can look at the code yourself, or if you want to take it and run with it, you can go fork it yourself.
And Valve's not exactly new at all when it comes to having games on their library that are made to run on Linux. They've been doing it for several years.
Oh yeah, the library for games on Steam for Linux. Last I checked, there was over 1,700 games that were Linux native.
Nice.
Oh wow. That's better than the last time I looked at it. It was like 5 Valve box games. That was, of course, a couple years ago. I don't have a Linux computer, so. Oh yeah, that. So you could, yeah, because Linux is free in whatever version. So you can build a computer that can run Linux and just install it and try it out.
Yeah. In particular, I believe Valve is building with Ubuntu as their base. So if you use Ubuntu 18.04, you'll probably have the best luck.
Or Mint with the Ubuntu repos.
Right, because Mint is basically an Ubuntu base.
Mm-hmm.
But, they're using tools that already exist, and they've been contributing back to the projects that they've been utilizing in Proton, such as DXVK, which is a translation layer that takes DirectX calls and translates them to Vulkan. They're using VKD3D, which helps convert DirectX 12 and DirectX 11 API calls to Vulkan on the fly. And there's been other attempts like this. The other one that's commonly used is Lutris and Play on Linux. Both of those are custom front ends for Wine that lets you do that same kind of thing, but they require a lot more tinkering. And Valve is trying to tune this to where it's literally plug and play.
I was on a project last year where they were looking at using VKD 3D. Pretty interesting stuff, man. And you're right. It's all open source, and devs love that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And the good news is that any Windows game installed on Linux will automatically detect and support any controller that Steam currently supports. So that if you want to use your PS3 DualShock controller, you can. If you want to use your Xbox 360 or Xbox One controllers, you can. If you want to use your Nintendo Switch Pro controller, those work too. Or if you even want to use Steam's own controller, that works too.
See, that's the one thing that I wish consoles had. I know it gives an unfair advantage, which translates to me as we recognize keyboard and mouse and other control like Steam controllers better. Like what I was saying is like having playing keyboard mouse on a console for games, that kind of thing. I'm glad that Linux is allowing other controllers in Steam Linux.
You know, it's really getting to a point anymore where the line between Linux and Windows is really blurry anymore. I mean, the only caveat to not running Windows over Linux is getting Hulu and some of the other streaming services to work within Linux can be a bit of a nightmare sometimes. But beyond that, I don't know. I'm getting hard pressed to really recommend Windows over Linux anymore.
Yeah, and a lot of those streaming service problems, if you install Chromium or Firefox isn't quite as compatible, but if you install Chromium or the Linux version of Chrome, that usually will fix a lot of those issues.
Mm-hmm.
They also mentioned that they have a list of 27 Windows exclusive games that they have vetted to be officially supported, and that the experience on Linux is, quote, identical to Windows.
Pretty sweet.
On that list are games that include Star Wars Battlefront 2, Doom 2016, Beat Saber, The Last Remnant, and Fallout Shelter.
And I have played Doom in Linux, and it's a good experience. Honestly.
Yeah, using the Vulkan API, Doom does a really good job.
Yeah, well, that's probably one of the most recent examples of an extremely well optimized game, though, as well.
Let's see. Also included on the list, Fate, Final Fantasy VI, Google Earth VR, Magic the Gathering Duels of the Planeswalkers, both the 2012 and the 2013 editions,
Sweet.
Nier Automata, Payday the Heist, Quake, Stalker Shadow of Chernobyl, Tekken 7, and Tropico 4. Oh, and I almost forgot, Warhammer 40k, Dawn of War, both the Dark Crusade and the Soulstorm expansions.
I'd love to see this take off, guys. Honestly. I'd love to see this take off.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. I've been waiting for this for years.
Yeah, I am in the very near future. I think I'm going to be taking my secondary system, throwing Linux on it, and seeing just how far I can get with my old 2600K and a GTX 770.
There you go. That's still, you might have to turn some details down, but that's still an okay 1080p experience.
Yep, that's what I'm thinking.
Now, is that a 2 gig or a 4 gig? variant.
It's the 2 gig model. I couldn't afford the 4 gig at the time.
Yeah. I had the 2 gig too. It was a solid card.
But less solid, perhaps, is Apple. Now, it is not a secret that we have a certain antipathy for Apple on this show. But this is probably one of the least ridiculous things about Apple that we've seen lately. Still, it appears that Apple might be switching to a new cord from the Lightning connector in the near future, as they have filed a patent with the U.S. Patent Office for a new connector insert assembly.
What kind of gain does this get them?
Well, apparently it is a variant on USB-C.
Okay.
So it is compatible with USB-C, but of course it wouldn't be Apple if it didn't have some of their own proprietary sauce in it.
That's a great word, sauce. That's a great word. I'm hard pressed to understand why they have to do something like that.
Here's the thing. Why do they have to do this? So they can charge more for their cables and charge more for pretty much anything else. Because you could buy, if they actually had actual USB-C, you could buy a cheaper cable on Amazon and then use it for your iPhone. They probably want to get more money, so that you have to just have their Apple USB, their USB-C cable.
Well, that's what they tried to do with the Lightning connector years ago by, saying that, only EPYC certified Lightning cables will properly charge your Apple device or allow maximum data transfer between your device and your computer. Yeah. And everybody basically said, I don't think so, and went ahead and bought the cheap cables anyway.
Yeah.
So in my office at work, we have the entire office is clad with a desktop phone, 2 monitors, a bunch of external USB 3 ports, and you can go anywhere in the office, and as soon as you plug your laptop in, we have both Macs and PC laptops. They all have USB-C. And as soon as you plug the USB-C connector in, you're automatically mapped to the phone. And there's more than enough bandwidth over that port for external devices to hook up to both of the 1440p monitors that sit there. It's a very seamless experience. USB-C is one of the best external ports I've ever seen. Period.
Yeah, it's USB-C, I think, is going to be the future. It's going to be a while till we see mass adoption, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it'll... USB-C in the high end and the mid-range is already kind of the standard. I don't think it'll see mass adoption until USB-C is the standard at the budget range as well. Because right now, I've got a budget phone. It's still micro B.
Which, that's not a bad connector either. I mean, you can still quick charge, right?
Yep.
So, but everything else is USB-C anymore. A lot of your new phones are.
And, it's hard to argue with that because USB-C, it is reversible. You don't have the eternal problem with micro B where you go to insert it in your phone, and if you're not looking directly at the phone, you don't know if you have it right side up or upside down until you actually try to jam it in there.
Right. Yeah, I've done that before. Yep.
The odd thing about this particular patent filing by Apple, though, is that the application itself is extremely vague about what it's going to be used for. It says, quote, it might be connected to portable computing devices, tablet computers, desktop computers, wearable computing devices, cell phones, smartphones, media phones, storage devices, Portable media players, navigation systems, monitors, power supplies, adapters, remote control devices, chargers, and other devices.
Everything they make.
Pretty much.
Everything. I think Hunter nailed it, man. They're just doing it so they can charge more. That's it.
Yes.
Hunter nailed it.
I've seen from them.
Welcome to the Apple dongle life.
Yeah.
So we'll have a link in the description below to all the articles we're discussing tonight, as well as a link to the actual U.S. Patent and Trademark Office filing for this particular connector. If you look at the photos, it's pretty blatant that it's some variant on USB-C.
Yeah. That's like I was saying earlier before we started recording, is this Apple geared, like a 1 terabyte hard drive is $150 versus this regular one for Windows or Mac or whoever is $60. 1 terabyte, same speed, same everything. It's just Apple. I think it probably is that it's their stuff is, of course, their stuff is geared towards their environment and Linux and whatever, and it's not very applicable to everybody else. Like if you can't plug a, I know that before they got Office to work on their Microsoft Office to work on their computers, you couldn't take a Office 360 or like Office 2003 whatever file, Word file, and then open it on a Mac because the languages weren't compatible at the time. So you had to convert it to their format to use it on their system. So that's just the annoying separation of the two systems, but Apple does that for security purposes.
So they claim.
Well, their ecosystem is pretty secure. It's just it doesn't play well with others.
That's only because they've got a smaller usage base than Windows. I guarantee you, if they had the same usage base that Windows had, that Microsoft had, they'd be facing the same exact security problems.
Well,
people would be finding exploits.
Case in point, before they got an Intel CPU in their computers, they didn't have any virus issues. When they did, somebody created a virus for, I think that was also before Windows. It might have been after Windows was bootable on their machines. I think it was an article of 154,000 Macs got the same virus from somebody going to Google Images, searching for like a holiday card for somebody, and clicking on a wrong link, and then it got a virus there that it spread to a bunch of computers. And it's like, well, we didn't have this before we got our non-Apple CPU.
Yeah, blame the CPU.
I mean, to be fair, the Mac OS uses a variant of OpenBSD, which is itself a variant of Unix. And being Unix-based, it does have a fairly secure kernel structure. But we all know that Unix-based systems, although they are inherently more secure than Windows in the sense that they are more modular, Unix has been around for, what is it, almost 50 years now?
Sounds about right. Since the 60s, I want to say, at least.
And it's most people who are computer savvy, and let's face it, most hackers are, know Unix inside and out. And OpenBSD and the mock kernel that macOS is based on is still similar enough and is in character similar enough to Unix-like systems that they can be exploited like most other Unix systems can be. It's, I mean, the most of the exploits for macOS are well known. And Apple does a good job of patching them. But like all other Unix systems, there are certain exploits that can be done. The big one just a little bit ago, been about 8 months ago now, was the dirty cow. There was the dirty cow exception that was a fault that allowed someone who was able to inject the right code into a system to give them elevated privileges to make them as root.
So you just said injected in dirty cow.
I mean, that's what the exploit was called dirty cow, because
Injected a code in dirty cow.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to segue. It was just I couldn't let it go by.
I mean, fair. It is funny, but in all seriousness, go look up the dirty cow fault, and it was kind of scary till it got patched. It got patched, I think, way back in Linux kernel 4.4, but
It does sound pretty scary.
Basically, what it did is it allowed someone who was a non-privileged user, someone who is a regular user, to gain root administrator privileges through a rather creative means.
That's scary, actually.
That is scary because I know news media, at least some of them, if they have a big enough budget, use Macs because, well, news media and like magazine people and stuff, because InDesign is a little bit better on Macs than it is on Windows. My university newspaper had Macs, so yeah, if you can control the news, you can control the world.
Yeah, put that finger on there.
But to slightly less heady topics, well, maybe not less heady, because we are talking about a wireless VR headset. HTC is soon to debut their wireless Vive adapter.
Yay!
But it will be costly.
Of course.
What's this thing all about?
So basically, HTC recently announced their pre-orders for the Vive wireless adapter. Now, being an owner of an HTC Vive, one of the biggest things and one of the biggest problems with using the Vive is when you have the headset on, you have a set of 3 cables that run over the back of your head down back to your computer. And when you're playing a VR game, if you don't have someone there to mind the cable for you, it is very easy to get tangled up in the cable or to trip over the cable.
Or to pull it out.
That too.
Right. Yank it out of your system.
Gotcha.
I want to go over there. What? It pulls you. What I've heard is worrying about the cable and getting yanked back because the cable pulls you out of the immersion of the environment you're in. I can definitely see that if you're in like scuba diving in water and it's like, why is there a cable behind me? Or why is there something behind me that's I can see, or roller coaster, or being Spider-Man is like, what? So,
yeah, to solve this problem, HTC has debuted or is going to debut their Vive wireless adapter, which will be available for pre-order on September 5th, but the price is going to be $299.
So, 500 for the headset for version 1 headset, 300 for this. That's the same price as a Pro.
Just about.
Well, plus that, and then, it's definitely an investment. Plus you can get into some of these treadmills and, some of these other peripheral devices too.
The Omni is what I'm. If I could get the Omni, if I had a big enough space, get the Omni and a Vive or Oculus headset, and then like a controller that's compatible with the headset, then you can play. If they had like a Call of Duty type game, they do have some military style game for VR. But yeah, all that working together with a this wireless adapter, that would be perfect.
Cool.
I
Plus,
hope.
it's what, Gen 1 2, right? I mean, I imagine the more of them that they make, the more, if there are additional generations of this device, which it sounds like there's a good use case for this,
Yeah,
it'll come
I
down in
hope
price.
I hope the Rift will come out with their own, because they also have cables, um, one or two cables coming off the headset. That's the headset that I'm looking forward to getting at some point. Because
You should talk with Jimmy. He has a Rift.
I've
Huh.
tried both the Rift and the Vive. I can't use both of them without my glasses. My vision is that terrible. But the Rift I can use with my glasses and it won't cause issues, blurriness.
So, do
The
you like the
Vive
Rift
still
better?
for the part of being able to use my glasses, wear my glasses inside, unless I can somehow strap tighten the Vive better or something, where it's not, because it was, I mean, I tightened it as much as I could and it was still sagging. My vision was still a little bit blurry,
Okay.
even with seeing it dead on, and I couldn't move the the lenses back and forth enough
Right.
to make it clear even with my glasses on. So yeah, that, so I'm hoping the Rift will have something like this.
Uh, the $299 price, however, is not the extent of what you'll have to pay. It'll also cost you a $60 compatibility pack
Mm,
to work with the first gen headset.
So 360, man. Plus the cost of the headset. Sounds like it's needed, but that's definitely an investment.
yep.
As far as the tech specs of it, it was developed in association with Intel and DisplayLink, and apparently it runs on the 60 gigahertz band using Intel's WiGig technology,
Hmm.
Okay.
which allows over short distances transfer speeds of up to, I believe, a gigabit per second.
That's extremely impressive.
Yeah.
And it's
Yep.
wireless.
But again, it's extremely short range because it's in the 60 gigahertz band. You're talking probably 25 feet at the most.
Is that, well? Hmm.
Which, given that it's designed to be it's designed to be an adapter for someone who is in the same room, usually within 5 to 10 feet of wherever it's plugged in at, it's not a problem.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Is like it shouldn't be a problem because you're probably going to be in the same room as your computer. It would be nice if it was uh, better range, so you can have your computer in your computer room or your bedroom, and you're in the den slash
Or
living room.
even in a living room, like say you have a gaming PC that's connected to a TV.
Yeah,
Even with that, I would think, yeah, I would think you'd be close enough.
Yeah, the reason I say it's probably less than 25 feet is I was reading an article on Ars Technica recently about 802.11ax Wi-Fi, which is still an experimental standard, but it also uses the 60 gigahertz band. And in their testing, yes, you could get gigabit speeds with AX, but if you were, on the other side of even a thin wall, forget it.
Ah,
Just because the frequency is so high, it doesn't have the amplitude to the energy to get through even thin walls.
gotcha. Pretty cool stuff, man. What's next?
Let's see. Oh, this is a fun one. So right now, as we're recording this, it's the middle of Gamescom 2018. And at the Asus booth over at Gamescom, legendary overclocker DeBauer has been working on a special project. It involves overclocking a pair of AMD EPYC 7601 processors. Those are 32-core, 64-thread CPUs, and he was able to take a pair of them up to 4 gigahertz using a water chiller.
Man.
And was able to complete a benchmark run in Cinebench, achieving a world record score of 10,460.
I can just imagine, a German accent bragging about overclocking 128 threads to 4 gigahertz, man.
Well, for what it's worth, you don't have to imagine because Kit Guru has a video.
Oh, yeah?
And I've included in the links below. I'll throw it in our Hangout chat here as well. But yes, DeBauer was interviewed by Kit Guru as part of their Gamescom coverage, and they showed the actual server that was being used. And of course, it's a custom server. It's using one of Asus server boards. But still, the parts alone, let alone the work that was done to tune it and tweak it, the parts alone would come to roughly 20,000 English pounds.
Whew. That's low to mid 20K range, dollar-wise.
Yep.
Probably around 25K. Wow. Double, almost double the speed. Wow. So they run natively at 2.2 gigahertz.
Right.
This guy's a wizard.
Well, there's a
beautiful
reason he's
setup.
one of the most famous names in overclocking.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got a fantastic delidding tool.
So I would encourage you to head over to YouTube and take a look at that video after you're done watching ours, of course. But it's very impressive to behold. It is a Cinebench score of 10,460. To put it in perspective, my Ryzen 7 1800X gets somewhere, I believe, right around 2K.
Okay. Yeah, that definitely puts it in perspective. Now, is that with any tuning? You overclock yours?
Right now, I'm running it stock. I have played with overclocking in the past, especially since I'm running it underwater. But for my day-to-day, overclocking doesn't provide enough of a performance benefit for me to really justify it too much. XFR does pretty much everything I need it to.
Nice. Yeah, I'd have to agree with you there. XFR is pretty nice on these Ryzens. Oh my gosh, that's impressive. Sorry, Hunter, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
It's one of the things I want to do is do XFR.
Yeah, I'll have to follow up with you on that because I think you're talking about an Intel part originally in the Dell, I think, right?
Well, I have an HP case that has Intel Nvidia in it currently. And I was wanting to compare it to a Ryzen AMD setup. Ryzen with a RX card.
Oh,
This is how it compares.
Apologies. I may have accidentally led you astray. I had to go look. It's actually, my Cinebench score is closer to 1,700 with my Ryzen 7 1800X. That's 8 cores, 16 threads at 3.6 gigahertz.
That's really good. That's a very solid score.
And by comparison, this CPU, this pair of CPUs that Derbauer overclocked, achieved about 5 times that.
Yeah. 128 threads, though.
Right, versus my 16. So
Yeah. So when you take that into comparison, that Cinebench score of yours on the 1800X is pretty solid, man.
all right.
I heart
Oh.
Nerbauer.
Yes, he makes some good products and he does some amazing overclocking. In fact, I am curious to see what he will do once he gets his hands on the thing we're going to be talking about a lot and has been the big focus of the tech press this week, and that is Nvidia's announcement of the RTX 20 series. We talked last week that there was discussion about, there was a lot of rumors flying around about it being an RTX series instead of GTX. Well, that was confirmed for us on Monday when Nvidia had their big presentation. And they announced the RTX 2000 series, the 2070, the 2080, and the 2080 Ti.
Yep.
I've included a link in the articles below to the archive of the PC World stream of that event. I couldn't get a direct link to Nvidia's stream because they did do it on Twitch and not YouTube. But you can see all the relevant highlights on that link there. And they also, of course, have up now on Nvidia's main site all the information about the Geforce RTX cards, including pricing information. And I honestly think this is probably one of the pain points for a lot of people when it comes to the Geforce RTX series, as the 20 series represents a big step up in price from the 10 series.
That's probably the most controversial part, honestly. I think
Mhm.
that's what most people are not too happy with, is the price point. It's expensive. It's extremely expensive.
It didn't help that NVIDIA's presentation almost exclusively focused on the Turing architecture's ray tracing abilities, which is a fascinating technology and one that is well worth the time going down the rabbit hole to learn about, because it's actually a very old technology, but it's so computationally expensive that it hasn't been used seriously in games for a long, long time.
Mhm.
And on the one hand, I have to give Jensen credit. He pointed out the fact that the 2000 series will require a new set of benchmarks to understand what a performance difference it makes. But part of me, the skeptical part of me, there's the skeptical voice in the back of my head keeps saying, why did he focus on ray tracing so heavily, and why didn't he discuss traditional benchmarks? And apparently I wasn't the only one who thought that way.
Well, most of the tech press has kind of mirrored that opinion, probably. Uh, I'm kind of curious as to why they didn't at least say something beyond just 1.5x, greater performance. I'm wondering why they didn't put a little more emphasis on performance. I mean, it's going to get probably around 20 to 25% better performance than the previous parts. So,
Which is what every card, every new series has over the previous generation series. And that's what a few of the tech YouTubers have seen videos of said. Thing I wanted to bring up beforehand, if is I read an article that they had a demo of a couple of games, like 3 games, at Gamescom after the presentation was over. If you using, I think it was a 2080 Ti in games, but there was one person who said that he noticed that the 2080 Ti in the Shadow of the Tomb Raider, which is the newest Tomb Raider game, didn't get it got it was unable to get 60 FPS in 1080p. It's like a 20 Ti. That's that's a little messed up. It's like $1,000 card, $1,000 to $1,200 card, and it can't even do 60 FPS like you'd normally think. You don't normally think it'd be 4K that it would do at least 60 at instead of 1080p.
I'm waiting for final reviews
Yeah,
or a
there's a
final
lot of
product.
people who are saying the same things. Like, why is the price premium for something that's not going to give good gaming benchmarks? But one YouTuber, actually 2 of them that I know of, I've seen a lot of videos of, Jay's 2 cents and also UFD Tech said that y'all don't understand that ray tracing is a huge computational force that they're putting into a video card that's doing it in milliseconds versus um, CGI and other companies for movies have done. Movies take about maybe 2 years or several months for doing the
Post effect.
SFX. Yeah, that stuff that
Yeah.
uses ray tracing in some of the movies, and they're put into video cards. So they're taking something huge, like basically putting like a supercomputer into a small part. And
Yeah, that
so,
was part of the marketing that they were using during the presentation itself, where Jensen Huang had their big old DGX2 server in hand. Now, if you've read anything about that, the DGX2 contains, I believe it's 8 Geforce V100 cores. So it's essentially 8 Titan Vs on a single board.
mhm.
And he claimed, I don't know, again, be skeptical, but be hopeful. He claimed that a single RTX 2080 Ti was able to render with equivalently to that DGX2. Now, my hang up with a lot of this is the way Nvidia responded to the criticism, to the backlash. And honestly, it just strikes me as a very weird way to respond. What they did is they released a couple of slides.
Oh, yeah.
And both of these slides really don't say much. Let me see if I can bring it up here on screen. Yeah. And here we are. Okay. So I'm showing it here from The Verge, but it's the same regardless. This screen in particular is the one that bothered me. Because here they're claiming 2 times performance over the GTX 1080. But they don't say what they're measuring. They don't say what performance, how they're defining performance. They're wanting you to assume it's FPS, and it probably is. But they don't say specifically.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then they do one of the things that in data visualization they tell you to never, ever, ever do, and that is to use a stacked bar graph.
I'm just waiting for final reviews.
And so, if the light green bars here represent, according to NVIDIA at least, the performance of the RTX 2080 compared to the GTX 1080 when they use the DLSS, or their deep learning super sampling, basically a form of anti-aliasing. And that's where they're getting the 2 times claim. Honestly, I don't think that's a fair comparison. I mean, even if we're assuming that these numbers are legit and that they represent, without any equivocation, what the actual performance difference in FPS or whatever they're measuring in this chart, the fact that they're comparing the GTX 1080, which does not have any type of deep learning or any type of tensor cores or ray tracing cores or anything like that built in, to the RTX, which has fixed function units to handle that type of ray tracing, is, I'm not even sure what the right word to be used would be. It is flim-flammery at its best.
Mm-hmm.
Really, if you want to see what the difference is going to be for most users, look at the dark green bars. When you look at only the dark green bars, that looks a lot less impressive. Now, admittedly, in some of those it's showing 1.5, but in some of those it's only showing about 1.25 times the performance. And remember, these are very specifically selected. Pretty much all the titles there are NVIDIA-sponsored titles.
I've heard varying observations regarding this specific graph, and most of the guidance I'm hearing is that normally NVIDIA is pretty close. Like, they're not trying to fib or anything. I'm sure there's some potentially some funny shenanigans that are going on behind the scenes here, but again, I keep going back to saying, wait for the final review. But it is kind of interesting that NVIDIA would have this response, but I think it's kind of NVIDIA's way of dealing with situations like this anyway.
Admittedly, I think this is NVIDIA trying to do damage control.
Yeah.
But I honestly think they've damaged their case worse with the way they've responded. Because before, people were kind of assuming, well, NVIDIA has something to hide. There's something they're not telling us. Well, now they've told us something, but the something they've told us doesn't mean anything.
I'm not sure if I buy that the 2080 by itself, or even if it's DLSS, can get 4K HDR 60 hertz at these frame rates, because these were shown to be you have to have a 1080 Ti to get 60 hertz or 60 frames per second or more on 4K Ultra. The 1080 can only do like 30 or 40 in Ultra on 4K. And I know that these are slightly faster, of course. Possibly.
Right.
But I still don't quite, and they don't even say what CPU they use. Of course, they probably might have used the i9 or an 8700K, but still, they're not giving enough information for us to really buy it.
Yeah, that's the other thing is Brian Stroh, he runs the BPS Customs channel on YouTube. And he did a video that I really appreciated. It's where I get the line, be skeptical, but be hopeful, because that's what he calls the video. And he specifically points out that he went and he ran the benchmark for 3 of these games. I believe it was Call of Duty World War II, Battlefront 2, and Mass Effect Andromeda. He ran the benchmarks on his 1080 at 4K, but he cranked all the settings to low. The one he showed in the video, he got 59 FPS at 4K low. So, I'm not saying, that there's any shenanigans going on here. I just think it's rather odd that they're specifically saying 4K HDR 60 hertz when Nvidia knows HDR hammers Pascal cards.
Yeah.
And
you're right.
And they say it's the RTX 2080 is achieving those FPS, which is better than what they told us before, which was nothing. But these, without context, these are just numbers.
Yeah. We don't even know if RTX is on or not. If ray tracing is on or not. I assume it's not, since they're at least 60 hertz and above, or 60 frames per second and above.
And most of these titles probably don't even have traditional ray tracing implemented, unless they're doing it through something like DirectX 12 or Vulkan that is platform independent.
Yeah, there's a list of what, or at least Nvidia put out a list of what games are supported by RTX. Let's see if I can go back to that list. And compare. PUBG is on it for, well, it says RTX games coming soon is the list that Nvidia put out. And PUBG is on the list, but the other games aren't. Let's see if I can.
And for reference, they did demo 3 games on Monday.
Right.
In particular, they showed how ray tracing, or RTX, would affect the experience in Battlefield 5, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and Metro Exodus. But again, Shadow of the Tomb Raider is part of what caused all the controversy in the first place, because with RTX enabled, the 2080 Ti was only achieving between 30 and 70 FPS with ray tracing turned on, which is concerning. But, the devs answered and said, hey, this is a very early implementation of RTX. It'll be better by the time we ship in, I think, November.
Mm-hmm.
And I have no doubt it will improve. And yes, we are looking at early drivers. But everything I'm seeing from Nvidia indicates to me that the 20 series, and this is me speculating, so take it for what it's worth, the 20 series is a transitional series.
Yes, I completely agree there.
It is them introducing a new technology, bolting it onto what is essentially a refreshed Pascal core, and then using that as a bootstrap on the 12 nanometer process. And they're essentially waiting it out until TSMC is able to get and produce GPUs at the 7 nanometer die, or the 7 nanometer process, at sufficient levels that they can release a 7 nanometer card. I think that is what Nvidia is gambling on.
That means a refresh in 2019.
I wouldn't doubt it.
The
Because
refresh is
who's AMD using?
AMD is also using TSMC.
Aha. Because their Ryzen 2 is going to be on 7, and so is Navi. So
Right, which makes me think that's why the 20 series is transitional. We know from AMD's previous roadmaps that they're planning to have something ready to show in March of 2019 on the GPU front. It would not surprise me to hear not very long after that, with Nvidia introducing a refresh of the 20 series. Maybe it's the 3000 series. Who knows?
it's just going to be refreshed to ring on a better processing scale. So
I mean, I'm not trying to downplay what Nvidia has done. To make real-time ray tracing a possibility on a consumer graphics card is no mean feat.
no, it's not.
But at the same time, I'm not sure that's a feature that most gamers are going to be interested in.
Yeah, because I was thinking about that too. It's like, do I really care about looking at the environment? Oh, this is pretty. The water is so realistic. Fire is so realistic. Or actually playing the game.
Well,
Like,
I will
to do
admit,
that.
I have friends, in particular. I'll Keith May over at WCCF Tech. He is all the time using NVIDIA's Ansel technology to take beautiful screenshots in games.
Mm.
It's kind of an obsession of his, honestly. But there are some people like that. And for them, I'm sure ray tracing is going to be a huge boon.
Yeah, but I don't think I don't think there's enough people wanting to spend that kind of money for a video game screenshot or a video game photography type of thing. I mean,
You're probably right.
I've done that with the Division. I've looked, and also Destiny 2 and Destiny 1. But that was only like maybe 2 to 3 to 5 minutes, and then I played the game. So unless it's gonna make everything sharper and more realistic, like you're not even looking at a video game, you're looking at real life, and hopefully the lip movement and the hand movement, and at least especially fingers actually looking more realistic in certain games would look as good as the demo videos that they showed, which is the problem with the Division when it came out versus what they were showing people. If that gap was tightened a lot more or even invisible, then yeah, that'd be great. Um, I love seeing the environment more realistic than just um, choppiness on like pools of water or anything like that. But that's not really the main focus of a game. If you just want to look at something, then you wouldn't have much of a game element. It would probably be a game, but definitely not like a AAA title like most games are, because the focus is other objectives. Even for a stealthy game, I mean, there's still other objectives.
I'm waiting for 2019.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
You know, my RX 480s, they're getting long in the tooth, but they still play everything I want to at 1080p.
Yeah, me too. Can't say I'm not tempted not to just shell out for a 1080 or a Vega 56 or whatever, but I don't know.
I will admit, I have been watching eBay auctions for people who are selling off their 1070s and 1080s to see if I can yank a deal.
Yeah. Did you get anything?
There was one I was looking at. At the time when I started looking, the bid was up to $132, but it eventually went up to 280 something, and at that point,
Mm,
you're getting pretty close to new price.
yeah. I saw one that you were looking at that you showed me was ended at like 172.
Yeah,
Just not bad.
I seriously considered that one, but I finally decided with myself, you know what? I'm fine with my RX 480s for now.
And you got two, which
Yeah,
is
which is
good.
great in games that support Crossfire, but
Yeah.
those
Oh
are
yeah.
few and far between these days.
Yeah, just like SLI games. I thought about getting another 1070 for the win, but when a game really takes advantage of SLI, like Crossfire, um, yeah,
Yeah, as a general rule, get the most powerful single GPU you can afford,
yes,
and then you can think about SLI later or Crossfire. But that was one of the other things was the SLI bridge is gone. It is now going to be NVLink all the way.
And it's
mm-hmm.
expensive too.
Yes, the bridge for NVLink is $80.
Mm.
So not only do they get you on the part, but they also get you on the other part.
Yep.
Also, if you look real closely, the RTX 2070 does not have an NVLink set of fingers
Interesting.
to use
So
the
it's only on
bridge.
the 2080 and the 2080 Ti.
Correct.
So Pascal removed SLI on 1060. Now they're removing on 2070. Hmm.
Well, good luck to anybody who wants to buy two 2080s or two 2080 Ti's.
$2,400.
Yeah, at
Sign
least
me up.
2,400. But 2,400 plus $80 for the bridge.
I totally forgot about that.
2,480. At least 2,480 because of taxes and whatever.
I can't afford it now.
Yep.
All right. Well, there's a lot more that could be said here, but honestly, I think we've covered most of the big points about the 20 series.
Yeah.
Nvidia botched the marketing. They they tried to do some damage control with some benchmarks, but people rightfully pointed out that there's some problems with those benchmarks.
See, here's one thing. If they really wanted to convince people to buy the RTX line, they definitely should have, like everybody else said, they definitely should have gave at least a few benchmarks, especially the games that they demoed there. They definitely should have given benchmarks and then told like what CPU they're using and blah blah blah, and given benchmarks so they can convince people to shell out the money. But just talking about ray tracing only, it's like, man, why bother?
It's all kind of meh. I mean, it's good technology. It's way overpriced. I agree with both you guys. It's transitional, I think. It's great timing from Nvidia's part because they can kind of run away with pricing and make a lot of money because they're going to sell like hotcakes, man. Reviews are going to be probably pretty decent. You know, they're going to get a nice little performance uptick. They do consume a lot of power.
And people have been starved for GPUs for so long, Nvidia knows they can sell them at these prices. Which, by the way, we didn't mention what the actual prices were. That's kind of an important thing.
Yeah.
RTX 2070 is going to start from add-in board partners at $499, but the Founders Edition is going to be $599. Likewise, the RTX 2080 is going to start at $699, but the Founders Edition is going to be $799. And the Geforce RTX 2080 Ti, the normal edition from the add-in board partners is going to start at $999, but the Founders Edition is $200 more at $1,199. So $1,200. The RTX 2080 Ti is the new Titan, basically, from a pricing perspective. The RTX 2080 is taking the slot left by the old 1080 Ti price-wise, and now the RTX 2070 is going to be taking over the slot originally occupied by the 1080.
Mm-hmm. And the reason why the Founders Editions is so expensive is those are bin GPUs. Those are the
Yes.
best of the best because Nvidia came out with them first, of course. And the newest thing about them versus the old Founders Edition is they have two fans on them like an add-in board partner does. So it looks really, I like it. I like that for airflow, they have two fans. Um, it doesn't look as cool as the 10 series and previously, but it's still better. It seems better for airflow.
Yeah, and AIBs have traditionally been more expensive slightly. So
Yeah.
even though the AIBs will get, slightly worse bin parts, they're going to be slightly more expensive. I don't know where they're getting. So some of the press is stating that the pricing of AIB parts is supposed to be less, but
No, it's not
I
going to
doubt
be.
I doubt we see that in practice.
Because they'll have
The only
customers.
models you're going to see that are going to be less than the Founders Editions are going to be those entry-level models that have blower coolers
Mhm.
and have basically no factory overclocks.
Right. The factory overclock and the custom PCB is going to make the price hike go up. I expect at the Founders Edition level and above.
Yeah, and the one thing that has been noted by some of the tech press that I've been following, it does make it worse for people who turned to the Founders Edition in the past because it's a blower style cooler when they wanted better heat management within their case for smaller cases like your mini ITX or your smaller form factor cases.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a slight disadvantage to them moving to this open air design. But again, that's a very specific use case.
Yeah.
But even some of the add-in board partners like EVGA, MSI, and ASUS that I know of, oh, and also Gigabyte, they do have blower style cards. It's just they're like the reference style with a blower style on it. Uh, ASUS does have a blower style single fan um, their turbo card for it. That's the old reference style. So that is good for mini ITX builders and um, small other small form factor builders.
Well, considering the fact that the RTX and the 20 series parts will be open air, without the blower style card, wouldn't a blower style cooler be non-reference now?
Hmm. Yeah.
For the first time in probably a long time or forever?
Yeah.
It's kind of
That's true.
interesting.
That
The
is
one
interesting.
caveat to reference cards that are nice is the fact that they are shorter, typically,
Yeah.
by an inch or two,
Yep.
if not more.
Alrighty. Well,
So, Go
I
ahead.
think that wraps up all the tech news we had to talk about. Hunter, I believe you had a couple of hardware deals that you wanted to discuss real quick.
Yeah. So before the show started, Jason said that he found he found an 860 Evo for 1 terabyte for what was the price on that?
149.99 plus
Yeah,
tax.
and that made us find out that there's a SanDisk that is now 199. That was the only 149 that he found at the Best Buy in his area. But that made me find that there's a SanDisk 1 terabyte that Ned pointed out and this is a Ultra 3D NAND SATA, 560 megabytes per second read, 530 for write. That's actually pretty good. It's 170 on Amazon. If you want to have a 1 terabyte that's a little bit not as fast but cheaper, $15 cheaper, you could get the Silicon Power SP, is what it shows um, on the SSD. It's still 1 terabyte 3D NAND. It's for $154.99 on Amazon. $15 cheaper. It has 550 read and 500 write. That's still not bad. That is actually pretty good because the higher end SSDs have been around 500 write, maybe 510 write, maybe 515 write. And then read, of course, is what you're doing most of the time. So that's been, I've seen 540 write, I've seen 550 write, and 560 write. So those are two good ones that I would say are good. I haven't used them myself, but they have a lot of good reviews on them. Silicon Power SSDs are cheaper. That would be because the write speed is not as high as other SSDs, but 500 actually is pretty good. So,
those are great prices. Great prices.
Yeah. And actually, I think we've actually discussed this silicon powder model before. I went back and looked at some of the old show notes. I can't pronounce tonight. I went and looked back at some of the old show notes, and we actually featured this same drive about a month ago, but it is now $5 cheaper.
Nice. It's getting more. It's getting the prices are getting better because 155 is actually really, that's a good price. That would be as much as a sale price for that or any other drive. That's getting to the point where I can buy that for a sleeper build and just have that one drive, other than a separate OS drive, because I'd rather have one separate OS drive and one separate games drive, games and media. So yeah, it's definitely getting to where I can economically build plus anybody else who wants to get a 1 terabyte.
Those are some of the cheapest prices I've seen, and I've been shopping for the 1 terabytes for a few weeks.
Yeah.
Those are great prices, man.
Mm-hmm.
Can I borrow your nose? I want to borrow your shopping nose.
All right. I looked at that. I look at Newegg and Amazon, more so Newegg, pretty much every day, and probably too much at some points.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen. Well, I think we've had a good session here tonight. Anything else you'd like to add before we wrap things up?
Sleep. I've got a Chopin build coming, folks.
Ooh.
Do a video on it?
Yes, sir. Oh,
Awesome.
yeah.
So stay tuned for that, ladies and gentlemen. Hunter, anything else you'd like to add?
I think I might do a video on my sleeper build. That would be good to do a video on it. I have an idea for another video. I just have to get the logistics right. So look for that in the future.
Cool.
Very good. Very good.
Looking forward to seeing it.
All right. Well, thank you for tuning in, ladies and gentlemen. We appreciate you making it this far through the podcast. A little bit shorter tonight, but there's really only been one big thing to talk about this week, and it's been Nvidia's RTX, and I think we covered that pretty thoroughly. So stick around. If you find other content, you can find other content that you'd enjoy. Go watch past episodes of TechForge, or if you'd like to poke around, we have some excellent game reviews. As we're recording this, we had one that went up today for Hypergun. featuring our own Sam Unger with the Burke brothers.
The Burt brothers?
Yes, the Burke brothers.
Oh, Burke brothers. I thought you
Yes.
said Burt brothers. And I was
No,
like,
no,
that's
Burke.
Awesome.
So, might add that as an annotation to the end of the video. But regardless, thank you very much for watching. I've been Dynamo Ned. This has been TechForge. And remember, when life has you down, forge on.
Yep, forge on.
On Forge? Right.